volunteer of that effort at Dallas Baptist University. And it's very interesting that I found out today, I didn't realize this, Nick, that you actually spent, like our Supreme Court nominee, a summer studying at Oxford.
Oh, yes, I did. And so took the walks with C.S. Lewis and got a chance to some of the same paths over in Magellan. And so very much enjoyed my time over there.
So Nick is here because he's so smart, number one, and number two, because we want to sort of expand our, I don't know whether you'd say our focus, our reach, or maybe just our take on things to, younger minds than perhaps Kirby and myself. Because we know that there's this group of folks, Nick, that are growing into adulthood, beginning to make your impact on the culture in the millennial generation. And, all of you are not the stereotypical millennial. As a matter of fact, some of you are more conservative than your parents.
Yeah, it's really fascinating because I guess you could say I am a millennial. I am a selfie-taking, Uber-riding, student debt accumulating, Snapchatting millennial. Very much enjoy others' fascination with me, but very much don't put me in a corner or don't put a label on me. And so, but we're just an interesting group increasingly. I mean, we've got around 320 million Americans right now, currently, kind of according to numbers, and then relative to that, millennials are about 80 million. And so as we continue to enter into the workforce and as baby boomers continue to retire, we're going to continue to see more and more millennials begin to take influential positions, and what is just going to be increasingly more necessary for us just to, one, to be able to understand millennials, but two, also to be able to help reach out to millennials and build them and bring them into coalitions that ultimately will advance certain purposes.
Well, absolutely. And Nick, I look at young people, my children are all millennials. Actually, one of them may even be older than a millennial by a year or so. But when they come out of colleges, especially the secular universities, even if they've been raised in homes where the values are fairly conservative, as they are here in Texas, many of them change. Many of them radically change their views. And so I think that's why I think that all programming, organizational effort like Denison Forum is very important to help educate this generation to, just common sense on a lot of things.
Yeah, that's one of the interesting things, and I think Nicholas Kristof has spoken a lot to this, especially in his space in New York Times. A couple of months ago, he talked about how there's just a certain liberalism that's just intolerant towards conservative beliefs in the university classroom, which is just it's just tragic when you think about it, because the university is a place where ignorance meets wisdom, and there's the combating of ideas, and what's increasingly becoming more prevalent is that those ideas aren't necessarily being combated, but it's more of just forcing you to believe certain things. And so one of the things that we want to continue to do, especially as Christians, we don't have to worry about truth being not on our side, but rather let's just have an open debate with one another. That's part of what makes America so great, this freedom to be able to use our speech in such a way to think through these ideas and discuss these ideas, because we believe there's significance and consequences to our ideas. And so we don't necessarily want you to believe it, but just let us have a hearing towards it.
Absolutely. Listen, there's an elephant in the living room now, and we're going to talk about it. A wonderful announcement, actually, last night by Donald Trump, our president, that he has nominated Neil Gorsuch to the Supreme Court. Of course, there's a battle ahead. And Nick, I watched last night. First of all, the actual announcement of it was a little different, because he often just comes out walking out. The president will come out walking out with the nominee and spouse and wife or husband or whatever. But he didn't. He did a little sort of showbiz last night.
That was The Apprentice that came out, right? So I think every president plays to their strengths, and so what we saw with George W. Bush is President Bush just very much kind of the folksy good old boy, and he played to that strength, and that's why he was such a capable leader. Barack Obama tended to play towards the constitutional lawyer. That's why we heard such great lectures he would often give to us, whether we were wanting to listen or not. And then you have President Trump now is very much just the showman. And last night was just the manifestation of just a showman with this rolling out.
So we have, and it was interesting for me to watch it. And I think we'll open up the phones in the first hour and let people weigh in. But I watched him come out, and this new justice, he has kind of a young demeanor. He is young. He's only 49 years old, and conservatives who, we do expect him to be confirmed. There'll be a battle, but he will be confirmed, should be applauding his youth, because that means he has many years on the court. It's a lifetime appointment. And, but I saw him, and he's, fairly young looking. So is his wife. And yet I looked at her face and I didn't see many smiles. I think she's bracing herself for what's ahead. What do you think?
Unfortunately, if the protests last night were any indication, it very much is just going to be a very bitter fight. Unfortunately, I saw many tweets last night on Twitter where there was just individuals that were protesting outside of the Supreme Court, and they had signs that were already made, but they had left blank the actual name of the sign, which is just very unfortunate, because you're not even giving the person a chance at that time. You really are just being disagreeable for the sake of being disagreeable, and that indicates a closed-mindedness that's not necessarily conducive to being able to have a good and honest discussion.
Well, I was watching this, and as I was watching, looking at my phone and seeing all the different emails coming in from organizations that that we go to here on Point of View, organizations that sort of help inform us many times. So I got support, requests to support the Gorsuch nomination in one way or another from Donald Trump campaign himself, Heritage Foundation, Priests for Life. We're going to be talking with Father Frank Pavone a little bit later in the program. National Organization for Marriage, Family Research Council, First Liberty Institute, and I'm hoping Kelly will be able to join us to weigh in on this in a few minutes. Americans United for Life, World Magazine, even Phil Robertson from Duck Dynasty. He sent an email out. Also, Freedom Works and the Judicial Crisis Network is pulling together a $10 million campaign to get him confirmed. It will be for first a $2 million ad buy, and then a lot of other ads. So there'll be lots of Christian, conservative organizations pulling together to work on this, and the hearings I expect to start soon. Yeah,
I think what we're going to continue to see is it's just a very brand new day for what it looks like to be able to get a justice confirmed. The fact that you have to have $10 million in a campaign to be able to get a justice confirmed in a non-political spot is just very paradoxical to me. But what we see with Gorsuch is you see an individual that is just highly competent. He went to Columbia for undergrad. He did Harvard Law, and then was a Marshall Scholar over at Oxford University. So he's got his educational credentials. He's just been such a sharp thinker on the courts, serving in the circuit courts since 2006. And what you continue to see there is he was just a strong champion for religious liberty specifically. And now what we're seeing is what's so interesting is Politico called him Scalia 2.0, and in the sense that he very much is just this brilliant mind that's also demonstrating just a sharp wit when it comes to writing opinions.
Well, it's going to be interesting, ladies and gentlemen. We will open up the phones in a few minutes so you can weigh in on this new pick for the Supreme Court, and we'll be right back.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
As the congressional debate about repealing Obamacare moves along, there will certainly be a debate about some of the facts surrounding its effectiveness and implementation. Writing for the Daily Signal, Aline Sanger lists 8 reasons why Obamacare should be repealed. Some of the facts she cites should be part of the congressional debate. Cost is a significant concern. According to the Kaiser Family Foundation, average family premiums for employer-sponsored plans have increased almost 32% from 2010 to 2016. And when you look at the individual market, the average nationwide premium increases have been 99% for individuals and 140% for families. Choice and competition is another issue. Many Americans don't have much of a choice when it comes to insurance plans, and that also affects cost. A Heritage Foundation report will be coming out soon that shows that 70% of U.S. counties have only 1 or 2 insurers offering coverage on the exchange in 2017. Plan cancellation is another concern often voiced by listeners calling into my radio program. When the rules and regulations of Obamacare took effect in 2014, many insurers were forced to cancel plans that did not comply, and as a result, there were at least 4.7 million plan cancellations across the 30 states. Finally, there's a problem of restricted access to medical providers. The Robert Wood Johnson Foundation concluded that 41% of these networks were either small or very small. That means that some include less than 10% of practicing physicians. Others may only include between 10 and 25%. So these and other relevant facts should be used to make a case for repeal, but also need to be considered when a workable replacement plan is offered. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kirby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Welcome back to Point of View. I'm Penna Dexter, and Nick Pitts is in studio with me. Kirby's out today. He had another appointment, and I'm so glad, Nick, because it's fun to have you here, and we get to kind of do our damage, whatever damage we'll be doing today here on Point of View. And what we are discussing, ladies and gentlemen, of course, is the nomination of Neil Gorsuch to the U.S. Supreme Court. He'll be an Associate Justice, and Nick mentioned some of his credentials, and he's on the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals, which is out of Colorado. It's sort of that part of the country. He did participate in joining the opinion in the Hobby Lobby case about the HHS mandate for Obamacare. And I'm sure that's one of the things going to make the liberals mad, and it will come up in the hearings. But it does show that he has a good take on religious liberty. And this case, of course, was the religious liberty of business owners and businesses to practice their faith in the workplace, and to not to have to violate the principles of their faith in their health care, what they provide to their employees. And so this bodes well, I think.
Yeah, I think, one, what we're seeing with Gorsuch is an individual that is very much wanting to protect the Constitution. I think the quote that everyone keeps on reading about relative to one of his just literary flair with one of his remarks is that he would say, a judge who likes every result he reaches is very likely a bad judge. And so what he's doing is he's not trying to legislate from the bench. He's rather just trying to see the document, the Constitution, as a document that was written over 200 years ago, and uphold that law. And what we're seeing is when you uphold that law, what we know to be true is that religious liberty is just significant when we think about the rule of law. So not only is he doing that from a just a strict constitutionalist standpoint, but what you're also seeing is he's just a man of faith. There are Religious News Service put out 5 faith facts of him, and what we know is he's a part of an Episcopalian church in Colorado. It just as recently as 2 weeks ago, he was serving his local church as the usher, and so we see a man that not only is willing to fight the battle and to be able to give religious liberty to Americans, but also someone that practices his religion as well, which is always a positive.
Yeah, so we've got an Episcopalian. We've had so many Catholics on the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
And Episcopalians, I mean, it can be worrisome. In fact, Kelly and I were discussing this at one point, as he was one of the possibilities here, Gorsuch was. And, you know, the fact that Episcopalian Church has sort of views on certain issues like same-sex marriage that we don't agree with. But this man he's sort of shown himself to be more on the social conservative side, although he hasn't ruled on any abortion cases. He's written a book on the sanctity of life, hasn't he?
Yeah. So he literally wrote the textbook on euthanasia and just the inherent dignity within life. And so we may have problems in life, but life is never a problem, but rather something to be protected. And so he's a champion for the dignity of life, one. And two, I think relative to just Episcopalian and kind of the mainline Protestantism that's fallen into, I think Jacob Loeffler kind of put it rightly when he said that from his research, what he's finding is that the clergy often has that much more of a kind of a liberal theological bent, but rather the lay people tend to be more conservative in nature. And so I think that's an important distinction, especially relative to Gorsuch for Gorsuch a time as this. I just totally ruined the joke. I ruined it.
Love it. Well, the confirmation, as we said, is going to be an interesting battle. And part of this, playing into this, of course, is the ability to filibuster a nomination. In 2013, Harry Reid, who was the Senate Majority Leader at that time, got a rule passed that basically only requires 51 votes now in the Senate for confirmations of justices. But the exception was the Supreme Court. So in this case, we now have 52 basically Republicans and 48 Democrats. So you would need to get some more to pass this person without changing the rules and requiring what is called a nuclear option. But I'm looking at some of these senators out there in states like Missouri, Claire McCaskill, West Virginia, Manchin, and others. Maybe Angus King in Maine, who's an independent, who would, could be convinced fairly easily to vote for Gorsuch because they've got elections coming.
Yeah, I think you're hitting it right on the dot. Politico Playbook put out a list, and they said that there's already 7 Democratic senators that they see as potentially leaning towards favoring this nomination. And then if you just look at the electoral map a couple of months ago, what we saw is that many of these Democratic seats are finding themselves up for re-election in 2018. And those Democratic seats that are up for re-election are also states in which Donald Trump won. And so are they going to face the backlash? Or is this the kind of is this the hill that they want to die on inevitably and lose their Senate career in 2018 simply because of a vote for an individual that's highly credentialed and highly respected across ideological lines?
Okay, here are a couple of other facts about Neil Gorsuch. One, his mom was the head of the EPA under Ronald Reagan. And also he clerked for Byron White, and also for Anthony Kennedy. And if he is confirmed, this will be the first justice to serve with another justice on the Supreme Court that he clerked for ever. So that's interesting. And, something about this is that Anthony Kennedy is approaching 80, or he may already be 80. So some people are seeing him as perhaps the next one to leave the court. And I think what he sees as far as nominees right now is going to help him in his decision. If he sees reasonable nominees going onto the court, he might feel like, well, okay, it's okay for me to leave. If Trump had nominated a real firebrand conservative this time, it's possible Kennedy would have tried to cling to his position in the court longer. What do you think?
Yeah. Again, it's the speculation game, right? And so I think what we saw with President Trump is there has been much that people have made of his first 11 days, I guess you could say, in office. And there's been a lot of brouhaha and just a lot of, I guess you could say, just antagonism from both sides of the aisle relative to some of the decisions and executive orders he's passed. But what we saw with Gorsuch is we saw something to be thankful for if you're a conservative. This is an individual that shows great competence. He shows great intellectual fire. This is an individual that's shown that he is fully aware of the situation as well as just his vocational competencies. And so what we're seeing is Trump delivering on a particular promise, which when someone delivers on a promise, for me, only gives me confidence moving into the future.
It does. All right, a battle royale is something we're expecting, and yet there's a couple things that I think people who really are advocating for Gorsuch to be confirmed quickly could say. One of them is, when he was confirmed to the 10th Circuit Court of Appeal 10 years ago, it was a fairly similar Senate in makeup as we have now, and he was unanimously confirmed.
Yeah. Think about 2006. Think about that Senate. It had individuals like Senator Barack Obama at the time, who also happens to be Gorsuch's classmate at Harvard Law, which is just a fun little fact. There's Hillary Clinton. There's Chuck Schumer, who's the currently Dem leader in the Senate. And then you've also got Joe Biden that are there. And they were a group of individuals that were a part of the unanimous decision to be able to approve. And now Chuck Schumer's decided that he's had a change of feelings in his gut, or a change of feeling in his heart, which is just really interesting when you consider just the fact that there hasn't been anything that should change relative to his judicial policy.
Another prominent attorney who is looking at this, I think fairly reasonably, is a Democrat He used to be the Solicitor General, or at least the acting Solicitor General for Obama. And his name is Neil Gorsuch. What about him?
Oh yeah, that's so fascinating. So he wrote a piece in the New York Times, and so I think his piece was so significant in that. Listen to what he says. He says, "I'm hard pressed to think of one thing President Trump has done in the last 11 days since his inauguration that he's done right. Until Tuesday, when he nominated an extraordinary judge and man, Neil Gorsuch, to be a justice on the Supreme Court." This is an individual that was the acting Solicitor General for under President Obama.
Which is the government's lawyer.
Yeah,
the main lawyer for the
governor's lawyer on the other side of the aisle then speaks so highly not only of the competency but the character of Gorsuch. I think just speaks volumes. I think speaks volumes about Gorsuch and speaks volumes about how we should be moving forward relative to his nomination process.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to open up the phones now, 800-351-1212. We would like to hear from you, especially if you have any pieces of information or sort of out-of-the-box comments about this nomination of Neil Gorsuch for the Supreme Court, or questions for us about it. We would just love to hear from you. Again, 800-351-1212. Also, I want to send you to pointofview.net. There you can see a picture of Nick if you haven't seen it. And
why would you wish them such pain and agony to put a picture of me?
No, he's very handsome and scholarly, and you can see his bio. Our upcoming guests, we're going to talk later with Kristan Hawkins from Students for Life of America, and also Father Frank Pavone, a Priest for Life, about the life issue and millennials, sort of those two put together. That will be in the second hour. But we really want to dedicate the next half hour to discussions with you. So give us a call, 800-351-1212. Certainly on the table are the actions of President Trump in his first 12 days, especially the nomination of Neil Gorsuch for the Supreme Court. But while there, at our website, pointofview.net, there's a donate button up at the top. It's blue, and we would ask you to take full advantage of that. We could certainly use your financial help. We'll be right back.
When listeners call in, we never know what they're going to say, and sometimes they shock us, like Jacob did.
We as Christians, we should learn to support ministries like yours that is reaching out and shining light into darkness. This is why Satan has such a great grip on America and the world, is because the world support their own. They will spend billions of dollars to make sure they are heard. The Lord is working a great work through Point of View.
We are thankful for listeners like Jacob and you who become part of our family, a real part, by sacrificing to support the work of Point of View. Take Jacob's words to heart and support us today. Enable us to continue shining God's light into the darkness. We honestly cannot do it without you. Visit pointofview.net. Look for the Donate Now button, or call 800-347-5151, or send a gift to Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Pointofview.net and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Penna Dexter.
Just to give you a bit of an idea of what's ahead in the battle over the confirmation of Neil Gorsuch for the U.S. Supreme Court, Jeff Merkley, who's a Democrat in Oregon, a senator, U.S. senator from Oregon, he says this is a stolen seat. This is the first time a Senate majority has stolen a seat. We will use every lever in our power to stop this. Of course, he's referring to the fact that Merrick Garland was nominated by Obama to fill Scalia's seat. But since it was an election year, the Republicans just said, the people should be able to choose this Supreme Court justice to a degree through the election, and that we should not move ahead so fast on it. Well, the Democrats are going to definitely bring that argument up over and over, and I think it's fueling a lot of the opposition that we're already seeing to President Trump's nominee, isn't it?
Yeah, I think what we're going to continue to see, unfortunately, is just we're very much going to see scorched earth. It's going to happen. They're going to pull out all the stops in order to see that this does not come to fruition, and so it's just an unfortunate place to be in. An unfortunate situation just contextually just to find ourselves in. But I think one of the things that we're going to continue to see, though, is that his record speaks for itself. I mean, he's just, again, I'll go back to his educational record. I'll go back to his court opinions, his literary flair, his character. I think this is just an individual that just attests excellence. And I think it's going to be hard to put up a fight against someone like him.
I understand that his writing style on his opinions, and we've seen excerpts since the nomination and just in the days leading up to it. But his writing style is Scalia-like in a sense, but as you mentioned in the break, Nick, it's a little softer in a sense. It's not so acerbic and sarcastic sometimes as Scalia could be, although I really enjoyed him. This man is a little bit different, although he is quote-unquote Scalia-like.
Yeah, so very much just has the literary flair of Scalia, but not the scorched earth perspective that Scalia often brought. And I thought we saw that like even in the first Senate, even in his opening remarks last night. If you remember, he said, "Standing here in a house of history and acutely aware of my own perfections." That's just beautiful lines. And I think what we see with him, though, is yes, it's the Scalia-like literary flair, but also the ability to be able to complement your enemies on the ideological lines. He's someone that recognizes in a very loving way the truth of a particular argument that might be opposing to him, but then will be able to say, "I understand what you're saying right now, or I understand the perspective from which you're coming, but this is why I disagree with you." Very much more genial, winsome in manner, and I think it's just a model worthy of emulation for an individual that's looking to get into law, or just individuals that are just like myself, that's growing up, that's trying to make arguments in the public square. Very much can be just a winsome manner. Like we can agree to disagree on these particular issues, but let our ideas speak for ourselves and not character assassinate one another.
Yeah, it's all for a judge. I mean, for all of us, it's about presenting the truth in a winsome manner. For a judge, it's all about the law. And you have to be able to defend the law, the Constitution, apply it. And yet this man seems to have a unique ability to do it in a way that's not quite so combative, I guess. Now we're going to see in the hearings. It's going to be interesting to see the hearings.
Yeah, and I think that's where I'm really interested, just to be able to, because even just his appearance last night just was a very gentle man, but just highly competent in the sense that he knows what he believes and he's going to state what he believes. And I think one of the things from a judicial philosophical standpoint is he's not trying to legislate. He doesn't have an agenda out. His sole agenda is to be able to protect the Constitution that's led us to this particular point over 200 years ago. This beautiful experiment, what Joseph Ellis would say, that is America. He's just committed to protecting it and upholding the rule of law, which is something that we should be looking for in every justice.
Here's what the Wall Street Journal said about him, which is kind of an interesting comment about a judge who's, at a pretty high level, 10th Circuit Court of Appeals. He shows a concern for the people whose disputes are before the court. Parties before him know that they've been treated with fairness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's kind of what you were saying.
Yeah, I think I think that's a collective agreement that we might disagree. I think Democrats and Republicans are going to disagree how he views the Constitution, but I think at the end of the day, what you're looking at is this is an individual that views people much like he views the Constitution as something worthy of respect and dignity, which is just very admirable in today's society.
Let's take some calls. Again, our number 800-351-1212. Let's go to Debbie in Oklahoma. Hi, Debbie. Thanks for calling in.
Hi, you're welcome.
What's your comment?
Well, I keep watching the Democrats, and they're throwing up all of these tactics that they know are not going to work, because since Harry Reid introduced the nuclear option and we have a majority everywhere, what they're doing right now is not protesting out of principle. What they are doing is they are posturing for their constituents back in their home, because they know there is no way they're going to win. Because if we do the nuclear option, we're still going to get all this stuff passed anyway. But they've got elections coming up, so what they're doing is they're being out there and being loud and trying to show their constituents, well, I did everything I could. I'm sorry it didn't work. It's not my fault. Reelect me again.
I think you're right. And we need to explain what the nuclear option is, Nick, because, just to make sure, I think most of our listeners know, but in the Senate, to pass legislation, and to close the argument, the arguments about and the debate about legislation, you need 60 votes to really do that, but not for judicial nominees or other nominees, because they took that away 4 years ago, in 2013. Harry Reid put forward a rule that said you only need 51 votes to do that. So for all judicial nominees, you only need 51 votes, except the Supreme Court. They left that out. You still need, at this point, 60 votes. And so a lot of conservatives have said, we want to preserve the minority's rights to have a voice. We want to also involve the other party in decisions we make. So let's keep this 60 vote threshold for the Supreme Court if we can. And that's the operative word. If there's such pushback, if Gorsuch cannot get 60 votes, none of us have any doubt that the Senate will change its rules and only require 51 votes.
Yeah, I think really this is going to be, if anything of what our President Trump has taught us, is that the public is watching. He very much has had an ability to be able to make sure every executive order, every appointment, every move that he's made is before a watching audience. Now we have the opportunity with the Supreme Court nominee to be able to have a watching audience, almost to be reintroduced to a civics class that many of us took many, many years ago. And so why not have this be an opportunity whereby you have senators who have been elected from various states all across the country to be able to represent and ask questions, so that a listening audience of 320 plus million Americans can be taught again some of the basic principles and truths that allow the foundations of America to stay strong. Now, if it turns into a character assassination, then I think Mitch McConnell's going to have to kind of go towards the card up the sleeve, which is the nuclear option. But hopefully he doesn't have to do that, because we can have a civil conversation about disagreement.
Ladies and gentlemen, we now have a guest joining us. He is Father Frank Pavone, Priest for Life, frequent guest here on Point of View. He's the National Director of Priests for Life, and he's been very, very involved in sort of, I think I would say, the transition of Donald Trump not being on the team, but being someone who is looked to for opinion. And we're so glad that he's with us. Father Frank, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, hi, Penna. It's great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
It's good to have you. Nick Pitts is also in studio. And I guess the first question I want to ask you is, what do you think? What are your thoughts about the nomination of Neil Gorsuch to the Supreme Court?
It is another example of something Vice President Pence said at the March for Life last Friday. He said, we at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue are in the promise-keeping business. The president has kept a major promise that it was also the motivation for many people to vote for him, including myself, which is that he would appoint pro-life justices to the Supreme Court. I have absolutely no doubt that this is just about the best choice he could have made. We're going to see that as this process unfolds. I'm confident in the ultimate confirmation, although we have to be obviously fully geared up for this battle now. We just sent out an action alert today through our Priests for Life mechanisms as we do whenever important action is required on Capitol Hill. And the action is very simple. Contact your U.S. senators and tell them you want a fair, swift hearing to confirm Neil Gorsuch to the Supreme Court. But the bottom line is I'm confident he's going to be confirmed, and that we basically have, as close as we can get, to another Justice Scalia on the court.
Wow. Okay, you have joined us just before a break, so we've got a break coming up. You can stick with us for a few minutes, can't you?
I can, indeed, yes.
Okay, we're thrilled because we have a lot of questions we want to ask Father Frank Pavone, and including not just about Neil Gorsuch. We want to talk about the pro-life movement. He is, I call him a rock star in the pro-life movement, but he is, loved by so many pro-life leaders, and he works so hard for the sanctity of human life. So much has been accomplished, and we're going to ask him about that. Also, the role of the millennial generation coming up in the future in the pro-life movement. We'll do all of that after this.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. The Islamic Society of Basking Ridge, New Jersey has fought City Hall for the last 4 years. The society hopes to build a mosque in the Liberty Corner section of Bernards Township, ending the 25-mile one-way drive its members must make each day to attend daily prayers. The township has rejected their application 9 times. The planning board held 39 different public hearings over 3.5 years, significantly more hearings on a site plan than any other application to date. Every time the Islamic Society amended their application, the township insisted upon additional requirements. In short, the city buried the society in endless paperwork that no other house of worship had to complete. In November of 2016, the United States Department of Justice sued the township on behalf of the Islamic Society. Less than 2 months later, they won. Those seeking to build a house of worship should never be harassed. It is both unfair and unlawful for a city to require one house of worship to meet certain standards, but allow a different religious body to ignore those same standards. This case will probably be appealed and the challenge will continue, but I hope the Islamic Society will continue to be successful. In a land that values freedom, our government should never make the free exercise of religion difficult. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
You can learn how to protect religious freedom in the workplace, public schools,
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
I read last week in the Wall Street Journal a little piece that mentioned our guest, Father Frank Pavone. It says, Father Frank Pavone, a Catholic priest who runs the anti-abortion, of course the media uses that term, the anti-abortion organization Priests for Life, and was part of Mr. Trump's Catholic Advisory Committee during the campaign, said at Friday's march, this is the March for Life, that there was a hierarchy of issues for Catholics, and he believed abortion should be at the very top. Father Frank, explain that.
Well, there's no doubt that it's at the top. Again, common sense, as well as the magisterium of the church, has said this over and over, that life is the fundamental right. Without life, we don't have anything at all. So if we're concerned about health care, education, protection from terrorism, employment. I mean, you can't enjoy any of those things if you're not alive, not even religious freedom. You can't be religious and you can't be free unless first you are born. And so it really is philosophically, experientially, it's the foundation. And then you can look at it in another way. There's nothing that's taking more human life than abortion. I sent out, as I often do, a fax to all the parishes across the country asking for action to support this new Congress now defunding abortion. And one of the priests sent back the fax with the big words scrawled over it saying, what about bringing an end to the death penalty? So I responded to him by saying, hey, listen, I'm against the death penalty, but since you woke up this morning, we've killed more babies by abortion than all the executions that have taken place since 1976.
Wow.
So it's like, hey, folks, can we wake up, please, and apply some common sense? You know, the Wall Street Journal reporter was asking me in terms of President Trump's immigration executive orders of late, and how the immigration issue in Catholic thought lined up with abortion. And I said, look, there's only one way that these issues would ever be equivalent, and that is if we were rounding up 3,000 immigrants every day, bringing them to legal clinics and having them dismembered piece by piece. Then it's an equivalent issue. I'm not saying immigration isn't important. It's crucially important, and the church has teachings about it, but my goodness, it is no comparison.
Wow, that's powerful. Father, what would you say are some of the things that are working right now within the pro-life movement that you're seeing? Is it more of the legislative push? Is this the time that we need to be pushing our congressmen, our senators, our elected officials, or is there certain local organizations that are really creating an environment for life?
You know, it's always a combination of things, and we're seeing progress actually on all these fronts. But what makes the legislative arena particularly a priority right now is simply that we have such a window of opportunity that we do not always get. And that is that the planets have lined up, so to speak, where you've got a pro-life majorities in the House of Representatives, the Senate, and the White House. So obviously, as was being said in the earlier segment, going back to a Civics 101, to get a law passed, you got to have the House, the Senate, and the President signing the bill into law. And we've got all those three things lined up right now on the side of life, together with a more of a cultural awareness because of various things that have unfolded over the recent years. We've got more of a cultural awareness that Planned Parenthood, for instance, is engaged in some pretty corrupt and even illegal activities. And therefore, for example, the willingness to redirect tax money away from Planned Parenthood and to health agencies that do not destroy babies by abortion and that do not break the law by selling their body parts, for example. I mean, there's more of an awareness, a willingness to do these things now. And so pushing on the legislative arena, and Congress has been busy, the president has gotten busy. Now's the opportunity to do that. I think we need to have more awareness of that than ever before, without slacking off on any of the other, educational activities, certainly the pastoral and spiritual activities, and as you say, the local activities. I mean, local pregnancy centers and prayer vigils at abortion mills are saving lives every day.
Yeah, that's really good, Father. Are you aware of any legislative initiatives right now that Christians can be bringing to light and pushing? Is there a 20-week ban that's on the books right now that's needing to be pushed through Congress? Is it the defund Planned Parenthood? Can you speak a little bit more to that, of certain initiatives that are currently in place or need to be in place?
Yes, there are 3 or 4 key ones. The House already now, I mean, the 115th Congress just started at the beginning of this month, but the House already passed the No Taxpayer Funding for Abortion Act, and now it has to go to the Senate. But that's priority number 1, chronologically anyway, and that is to, right across the board, all the government agencies, permanent law not to let any of our tax money fund abortion. So that is a piece of legislation. And again, by the way, we have these action alerts I was talking about. So we have a special website, stopabortionnow.org. People can sign up and get, when it's time to call Congress on something, they'll get an alert. Right now, it's also to talk to the senators about confirming Judge Gorsuch to the Supreme Court. And the next thing coming down the road, it is going to be the defunding of Planned Parenthood. Again, there's going to be a vote on that, both in the House and in the Senate. We'll keep people posted on the timing, but even now, people can talk to their representatives and senators saying, hey, I don't want any of my money going to Planned Parenthood. Simple message. Don't hesitate to send in that message now. And then you mentioned about the 20 weeks. There is a very important piece of legislation that'll be coming up soon whereby the babies in the womb who can feel pain will be protected from abortion. That's a significant step forward. Of course, our goal is to protect all the babies, but this is a start because most people understand and accept this and support this, that we shouldn't be inflicting pain on these babies. And so that piece of legislation is coming forth. There's another piece of legislation that's going to be announced tomorrow. That is to take away the Johnson Amendment. That is to take away the legal restrictions on churches that say that they cannot intervene in political races. That's an important step forward because, again, it puts it back into the hands of the church to decide if and how much they want to be involved in political races. But it should be the choice of the church, not of the government. And so that's worth a whole discussion in and of itself. But we're going to be hearing more of that as of tomorrow. And then there's all kinds of things coming down the pike.
Father Frank, one more question, and that is that we hear these stats that the millennial generation is more pro-life than their parents. What impact is that having on the pro-life movement and even some of this legislation in your eyes?
One of the things that's happening is that this generation is also very savvy with social media. And so we've got the most pro-life generation. And by the way, our youth outreach director, Brian Kemper, does a great job on highlighting all of this. We got a big, vibrant youth outreach. And he always says, hey, we are the generation that will abolish abortion. And he says, and what they're doing is they're stepping right over to traditional media, they're stepping over the biased mainstream media, and the legislators are listening to it. I mean, they do these tweet fests and get the attention of legislators on Twitter, and boy, they follow suit. They listen. They pay attention. And so a lot of the momentum here is coming precisely from that. And the reason these younger people are so pro-life, they realize it could have been them. They could have been aborted. They didn't have legal protection. They realize that Roe v. Wade for them is a personal insult. They say, hey, why wasn't I protected? I should have been, and so should the babies who are in the womb today.
Father Frank, thank you so much for joining us today. And, I might add, their brothers and sisters may have been aborted.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and they're very aware of that. Yes, exactly.
Well, thank you for all the work you do. Thank you for weighing in with us today. And we'll have to get you back to talk more about the Johnson Amendment push and some of the other initiatives. So thanks for joining us today. I know you're very busy, and God bless you.
I look forward to the next time. God bless you, too. Thanks, Penna.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's Father Frank Pavone from Priests for Life. And, sometimes when he preaches, he sounds like a Baptist preacher. He's fiery.
He needs a little bit more passion is what I was thinking.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we will discuss the issue of abortion with Kristan Hawkins from Students for Life of America a little bit later in the program and continue to take your calls after this.
Why does Kirby Anderson do what he does? Because he believes in God's ability to use you to make a difference.
There's a real need for us to articulate a responsible biblical perspective and to give people an understanding of what is happening in the world, and in addition to educating them, to then empower them to go out and make a difference for Christ.
Together we can push back the growing darkness. It's not going to be easy. But by God's grace, it is happening one person, one community at a time. Join us in this mission. Become a monthly partner. $1 a day, $30 a month will make a huge difference. Or perhaps you can do $100 a month. We need partners of all sizes. We need you. Give today online at pointofview.net. At the top of the page, next to the Donate Now button, click on Become a Monthly Partner. Pointofview.net. Mail your donation to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221, or call 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kirby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I am constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.
Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Penna Dexter.
And in studio co-hosting with me is Nick Pitts. He is Director for Cultural Engagement at the Denison Forum on Truth and Culture. And he's a PhD candidate at Dallas Baptist University. And Nick, I know that you're working on your doctoral thesis and you're getting near the end. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So there is light at the end of the tunnel for those that are in the educational endeavors known as a PhD. And so I'm doing research on the two things we're not supposed to talk about in polite company, but what we talk about often on Point of View is politics and religion. And so I am exploring and doing research on John F. Kennedy's 1960 presidential campaign. It's often been said that Kennedy privatized his faith during the 1960 campaign, really said that the Catholic Church doesn't speak for me and I don't speak for the Catholic Church, and really just privatized his religion. But what I'm arguing is that he didn't just privatize it, he also politicized it as well. So with Catholics, he was putting his religion out there in order to generate himself as the favorite son. The one Boston Globe the newspaper said that he was the white knight for them. He continued to put his religion out there in such a way that tried to compel Catholic support, but also quell Protestant concern. He was both privatizing his faith and politicizing his faith. And what I'm seeing for the implications in the 2016 election is what we saw is that individuals, we are a nation of immigrants, and we're increasingly becoming more diverse. That's what happens when the founders sowed the seeds of liberty into our soil. We're reaping a harvest of diversity. And a part of that harvest is what we're seeing is a cardinal virtue in America, which is tolerance. We're going to be tolerant of other people's differing beliefs, but we want to be aware of what those beliefs are. And so what you saw in the 2016 campaign is Donald Trump reached out to evangelicals. He reached out to Catholics. He reached out to religious audiences, and they inevitably voted in favor of him. But what we saw with the Clinton campaign is she very much withdrew from religious audiences and didn't reach out to them. And inevitably, religion did play a role in the 2016 election, just like it did in 1960.
Well, I think when you say you're a Catholic today and you use that as one of your planks of your campaign, you're saying, I'm pro-life, mm-hmm. I'm pro-marriage, I'm pro-religious liberty, and some things like that. You might also be, it doesn't really tell us too much about what you're saying about your economics mm-hmm. or maybe your stance on immigration, because the Catholic Church actually has been for a lot of immigration and amnesty and things. So it doesn't tell you that, but I do think on the things that we talk about so often here at Point of View, which has to do with the social issues, it's a badge of honor to be a Catholic. We have a lot of Catholics in government now, mm-hmm. certainly on the courts. Mm-hmm. Yeah. We have a lot of Catholics on the Supreme Court. So it's not the negative that Kennedy faced. Mm-hmm. It's really a positive politically for the Republicans and conservatives.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. So I was born in 1985, and so I was an 80s child. I very much still can sing along to AC/DC, and if you'll let me, I would love to sing a power ballad a little later on during the show, if that's okay.
We'll ask Warren Kelly, our president here at Point of View, if that's okay, if we can kind of divert.
Well, I'll start warming up my voice, but in the meantime, what we saw is in 1960, it was very much Catholicism. It was just a very negative, very much a vitriolic kind of to be a Catholic in the U.S. I mean, you had individuals like here in Dallas, W.A. Criswell, that was speaking very negatively about Catholics, and especially about a Catholic as a president, and Norman Vincent Peale and many others. But what we continued to see with that is that Kennedy, yes, he met with them, even though they disagreed with him. And I think that's something that we can learn from today, especially with the Gorsuch news that's coming out. We don't necessarily have to agree with one another, but I do think that we need to put everything out onto the table with one another, and to recognize religion might not be the most important part of your life, but it is a shaping influence in the lives of many Americans. And we just need to be aware of that when we're making decisions that are ultimately for the good and direction of the country.
All right. We've got now we're joined by our guest, Kristan Hawkins. And Kristan is, she runs a great organization, Nick. I don't know if you know about this group, but you should. It's Students for Life of America. And they do great work across the country on college campuses with regard to the life issue. Kristan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I'm so glad to be back on the show.
Well, it's good to have you. And we've got Nick Pitts with us. And Nick is a doctoral student right now at Dallas Baptist University. And we've just been talking about his dissertation. And it has to do with religion and politics, the presidency, and specifically John F. Kennedy. So it's super interesting, but that's not our topic today. Our topic today is what you're doing. What are you guys doing? And just tell us about some of the successes you've had across the nation on the college campus on the life issue.
Yeah, it's been an incredible 10 years. We launched 10 years ago, and our mission was really to go on the offensive, because we know that culture happens with young people. That's where we change the culture. Politics is downstream for culture. Everything is happening right there in the schools, and this is where the abortion industry is targeting. So, we're on over 1,100 high school, college campuses right now. We have groups in every state of the nation. We just finished up with the annual March for Life and the Walk for Life in San Francisco. We had our in Washington and in California for our national conference. It's the largest pro-life conference in the country. The pro-life generation is everywhere, and they are on fire. They are excited to see what's happening in Washington, D.C. and across the country. The polls are showing us that our nation is trending pro-life. Young people are trending pro-life. They're rejecting abortion. And so there's just so many things to do right now.
Kristan, I understand, and I know this because you were written up in the New York Times recently, and we've posted that article, ladies and gentlemen, at pointofview.net. She's just a part of it. It was about the Women's March that took place, not the March for Life, the Women's March. You requested also, there was other organizations that got more play in the media, but you requested to partner with it, and you were ignored. You marched anyway, though.
That's right. We knew it was going to be an anti-Trump march, but they were asking for a diverse group of sponsors. And so I contacted the event organizers really early on, at the end of November. And I said, hey, we would be interested in having this discussion, because this is an important topic in our country, the discussion of women's rights. And so often we see that, pro-lifers just aren't welcome at the table, because that corporate abortion lobby has just paid off any discussion about women's rights in our country. And if you're not with them on abortion, you're not welcome at the table. We were never allowed to be a partner or sponsor. We got our answer a couple weeks later when Planned Parenthood became a premier sponsor, so we knew they weren't going to acknowledge our existence in any way. Some of my friends' organizations, they actually applied for a partnership, and I think their names weren't so obviously pro-life, and so they actually were initially accepted. And then when an Atlantic article came out shortly before that New York Times article talking about how pro-life groups have been rejected like ours and others have been accepted, all the pro-life groups were rejected. But we went, and our message was very simple. It was abortion betrays women. It was a women-focused message, and we really wanted to talk to the women who were there about what the abortion industry has done to them, how it has duped them, how it has lied to them, how it has betrayed them. And we actually jumped in front of the march when it was marching down Constitution, and for several blocks, we were the front of the Women's March as we passed the White House. It didn't last too long, though, because once the marchers saw that we were pro-life and all of our young women were against abortion, we had some obstacles.
Let me jump in, Kristan, because the break is here. But we'll continue on that note and speak with Kristan Hawkins from Students for Life of America after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
You know, as the congressional debate about repealing Obamacare moves along, there will certainly be a debate about some of the facts surrounding its effectiveness and implementation. Writing for the Daily Signal, Aline Sanger lists 8 reasons why Obamacare should be repealed. Some of the facts she cites should be part of the congressional debate. Cost is a significant concern. According to the Kaiser Family Foundation, average family premiums for employer-sponsored plans have increased almost 32% from 2010 to 2016. And when you look at the individual market, the average nationwide premium increases have been 99% for individuals and 140% for families. Choice and competition is another issue. Many Americans don't have much of a choice when it comes to insurance plans, and that also affects cost. A Heritage Foundation report will be coming out soon that shows that 70% of U.S. counties have only 1 or 2 insurers offering coverage on the exchange in 2017. Plan cancellation is another concern often voiced by listeners calling into my radio program. When the rules and regulations of Obamacare took effect in 2014, many insurers were forced to cancel plans that did not comply, and as a result, there were at least 4.7 million plan cancellations across the 30 states. Finally, there's a problem of restricted access to medical providers. The Robert Wood Johnson Foundation concluded that 41% of these networks were either small or very small. That means that some include less than 10% of practicing physicians. Others may only include between 10 and 25%. So these and other relevant facts should be used to make a case for repeal, but also need to be considered when a workable replacement plan is offered. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kirby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
I had to really interrupt my guest, Kristan Hawkins, president of Students for Life of America. It's been such a successful run you've had, Kristan. You were tapped to lead the organization back in 2006. It's grown, and the millennial presence in the pro-life movement has grown. And I think your influence on that generation has also grown to what, I mean, we just had Father Frank Pavone on, and he was talking about some of the factors that contribute to that. To what do you attribute it?
Well, I think, science is showing our position very clearly in a way that we don't really have to explain. This generation has seen their brothers and sisters via ultrasound. This generation can Google the rhetoric that they hear and know, beyond a shadow of a doubt that what is inside of her is a living, whole, unique human being, a human person. So I think that's really shifted, is that, science is firmly on our side on this, and there's nothing that we're trying to hide. This is the same message we had in 1973.
That's good. Kristan, this is Nick Pitts, a fellow millennial, and so I'd love your opinion relative to what are some of the obstacles that many of your colleagues and individuals within kind of the pro-life movement are experiencing right now, and Students for Life. What are some of the difficulties that they're experiencing on the college campus or in the high school classroom?
Sure. Well, we always have the, administration pushback. We actually just won a case at Queens College in New York where our group was having issues getting started, and after, days with them filing a lawsuit, surprise, surprise, the administration relents and lets us start our Students for Life group.
Congratulations.
Thank you. You just have to be vigilant. And that's really what we have to tell our students is these are your rights. You need to understand your rights. And when your rights have been violated, you really can't be afraid to speak out, and you can't be afraid to file that lawsuit. We started 10 years ago. The word has kind of gotten out with colleges. I think enough administrations can Google us now to know that we're not going to take this line down. We still have an increasingly a larger problem into the high schools, where I think a lot of principals aren't really sure what the students' rights are. It's more like a little fiefdom, and so the principal, if might be pro-choice or pro-abortion, this doesn't want to talk about pro-life issues or about abortion. They think that they can stifle a student's speech, and a lot of it's just, hey, this is the Constitution. We recommend you read it, and that can be resolved pretty quickly. We have that issue. We do have the struggle on the campuses of the campus health centers are really in cahoots with the Planned Parenthood, where Planned Parenthood has built that relationship with the campus health center. And so not only do you have the Planned Parenthood and the abortion clinic or facility nearby targeting the students, you now have a campus health center referring women to that Planned Parenthood. And so we really try to work with our students to kind of intercept that relationship, to build that relationship with the campus health center, to bring in the Pregnancy Resource Center, because our Pregnancy Resource Centers, they totally outnumber Planned Parenthood. Yeah. It's unbelievable. But yet, when you're on campus, most students have no idea what a pregnancy center is. They've never heard the name. They have no clue they exist. But they know the name Planned Parenthood because Planned Parenthood's there on their computer. They're there on their Facebook and on their Twitter and their Instagram. They see them, where the pro-life movement is kind of is invisible. And so we've got to be better. We've got to be better about reaching her before they do, and marketing to her even before she gets into that moment of crisis, so she knows there's a place where she can go. That's good. So for Students for Life of America, what are some of the best practices? What are some of the things that you all are doing that you're seeing success at? One of the things we've been really seeing a lot of success is our Pregnant on Campus program, which is providing, finding out ways to provide tangible support services to women in crisis right there on campus. Women who are, just finding out they're pregnant and trying to decide, how can I stay in school and keep my child? Because really that's what the other side tells her, is that they tell her that's an impossible decision. That's an impossible position you're in. You're going to have to choose between the life of your child and your career and your education. And we want to tell her, no, you don't have to make that decision. It's going to be difficult, but we're going to be there every step of the way, and we're going to help you do this. And that's where we're seeing a lot of growth. We're seeing a lot of institutional change take place, where campuses are going, yeah, maybe we should offer that choice. Maybe we should have housing or daycare available to students. Maybe we should have lactation rooms and diaper changing stations in the bathroom. Where these are common sense things, and no matter how you might come down on the abortion issue, whether or not you think it should be legal or not, you should be at least be able to see the rationality in supporting a woman who's made the choice to choose life and to bring her child to term and deliver her child. And so that's where we've seen a lot of just success. We've seen a lot of bridges being built on campuses, and a lot of people reevaluating where they stand on the issue once they see the pro-lifers on action on campus, because it's not the pro-choice group on campus that's doing this work. In fact, many times when our groups try to have discussion panels about bringing resources to campus, the pro-choice group, the pro-abortion group won't even show up. But they see that it's the pro-life group doing that work.
Kristan, we were talking before about the March for Women, leaving out the pro-life people that wanted to be part of it. And then we're hearing what you're doing for women on the campus, and you're promoting these policies that are pro-woman. So to be a pro-woman in their eyes is one thing, but this would be a huge plank that they could add into their platform, if you will, that that women would be asking for not only other traditional feminist requests or demands, but also that the woman who finds herself in this situation of a pregnancy, perhaps without a husband or a partner, that there would be some provision for her. I mean, it seems like a no-brainer that this could be one of their demands rather than just leaving you out of the whole thing.
That's right. And really, if they were reading the polls and seeing what we see on college campuses, they would do this. And you saw in this election cycle, the Democratic Party, called for abortion on demand, all 9 months of pregnancy, and they actually amended their platform to call for taxpayer-funded abortions in all 9 months of pregnancy for whatever reason. That is just so extreme. The vast majority, over 70% of Americans disagree with that stance. And what has happened is the abortion industry has gotten their hooks into that party, and they've just gone more extreme. They feel like they have nothing left to lose. It's a social organizing tactic is what they're doing, and they're trying to go more extreme. But as they do that, they're going to lose this generation. I spoke with some Republican consultants and pollsters, and they were talking about, how can they win over young people? And I said, look, a lot of young people don't like some things the Republican Party stands for, but you can win them over on this issue, because no matter how these young people might feel about economic issues or, social justice issues, immigration issues, they will all acknowledge that, yes, there's something wrong with abortion, and the Republican Party does that. And I think that's what's so interesting about all of this is that, you don't have to go extreme, and you really shouldn't if you're paying attention to these numbers, because this generation tends to be pro-life because they understand it. They get it. It's a human rights issue. It's a child that deserves the right to life. I mean, we debuted one of our projects at UCLA, from all places, and we just asked students, when do they think human rights begin? I didn't even ask human life, which is a much easier question. I asked, when do persons' rights begin? And we had overwhelmingly people choosing at conception. And that's just unheard of, that you have a generation saying that, especially at a liberal, such a liberal school that's just inundated by Hollywood, as UCLA. So we're definitely making successes, and we're having strides there. So we just have to keep moving forward with that.
I couldn't agree more. As a millennial, I just want a chance, right? So you want a chance with the opposite sex. You want a chance when it comes into the workforce, and you want a child to be able to have a chance in the world.
Right.
And I love what you all are doing in the sense that you're creating a culture for life. Yes, you can't neglect the political sphere, because ultimately that's where public policy it reaches its tentacles much further than just the individual kind of community level. But you're creating a culture for life whereby mothers know that there are other opportunities other than just simply terminating their child.
Right.
1.3 million children could potentially die this year simply because of abortion, but there are 2 million families that are willing to adopt children.
Right.
And helping them to better understand that there's hope and there's people that are wanting to facilitate and walk with you to understand that there's more than simply just the eradication of a child. I love
final comment, Kristan.
Well, I want to give your listeners hope that there's so much happening in Washington. There's so much happening on the college campuses. The culture is changing. Heck, even Hollywood is changing on this issue. That we definitely can do this. I think one of the biggest challenges I have when I speak to adult groups about ending abortion is that people don't actually think it's possible. And if we're abortion abolitionists, if we're in this mission to win it, to end abortion, to save lives, to save women and men, to save families, then we need to challenge ourselves every day to actually believe it, to envision it in our mind's eye, and to believe that we serve a God who's almighty and powerful.
Amen. Kristan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
We'll be back.
When listeners call in, we never know what they're going to say, and sometimes they shock us, like Jacob did.
We as Christians, we should learn to support ministries like yours that is reaching out and shining light into darkness. This is why Satan has such a great grip on America and the world, is because the world support their own. They will spend billions of dollars to make sure they are heard. The Lord is working a great work through Point of View.
We are thankful for listeners like Jacob and you who become part of our family, a real part, by sacrificing to support the work of Point of View. Take Jacob's words to heart and support us today. Enable us to continue shining God's light into the darkness. We honestly cannot do it without you. Visit pointofview.net. Look for the Donate Now button or call 800-347-5151 or send a gift to Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Pointofview.net and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Penna Dexter.
Welcome back to Point of View. I am Penna Dexter, and Nick Pitts is here co-hosting with me. And we are taking your calls, 800-351-1212. We've had some great guests, and we're going to turn the mic over to our callers now. I did want to bring something else up that was handed to me as I walked into the studio today, having to do with the media. And certainly one of the organizations that's sort of been butting heads with the Trump administration is CNN. And apparently Politico is reporting that their Trump administration is refusing to put the CNN officials on the air, and this has been taking place for a while. The White House has refused, says Politico, to send its spokespeople or surrogates onto CNN shows, effectively icing out the network from on-air administration voices. It says that one of the officials at the White House said, we're sending surrogates to places where we think it makes sense to promote our agenda. And CNN is not such a place, but perhaps this ban is not permanent. And one CNN reporter who's speaking on background said the White House is trying to punish the network and force down its ratings. They're trying to call CNN from the herd, and they're really cooperating with the other networks, but not CNN. So, there's just a whole lot of media are reporting about this in Politico. And, is this fair? Is this practice? I think Obama had a sort of a bad relationship with Fox News, but he actually went on Fox News for an interview during his presidency. I don't think they ever pulled their people from it. Or is this Trump just being Trump and saying, listen, I'm going to play hardball?
Yeah, this is he just has a radically different communication strategy than other presidents. I think what you're seeing with Trump is, you see very much a usage of Twitter, just getting rid of the middleman, whether it's the press secretary or whether it's just press release statements, just tweeting out his thoughts. And so I think that's one way that he's demonstrating this radical new strategy. Second, last night, over 200,000 individuals tuned in to Donald Trump's Facebook account to watch the unveiling on Facebook of all mediums. And so we're seeing not only him using the Facebook medium and the Twitter medium, but so we're just seeing that he is just very much wanting to eradicate the middleman and just speak directly to the people. And right now, as the Politico article demonstrates, is he's one of the organizations that he's kind of singling out right now is CNN. They had the classic skerfuffle, I guess you could say, at his first press conference with CNN. And so what Mr. Trump does, what he says is what he does. And if you don't want to be on his bad list.
It's the most obvious on Sundays because of the Sunday shows, and they have a show, CNN State of the Union, and apparently Kellyanne Conway, Spicer, the spokesman for the White House, Reince Priebus, who's the chief of staff, and Pence have made the rounds on all the shows except for State of the Union. And I also did notice that in the press room in the White House, they move the people around. They don't necessarily put the major networks in the front all the time now or take their questions first. They're taking organizations like the Christian Broadcasting Network questions first and really elevating their importance.
And what you're seeing, what I believe was just introduced today, is there's even like a Skype contraption now where journalists from Middle America that don't have the resources to be able to send a reporter to D.C. now have the opportunity to be able to be called on to have their question heard by the press secretary or whoever else is giving the press briefing. Again, I just think this is a radical new strategy that obviously change always brings about some resistance. And what we're seeing is resistance, definitely in the form of CNN right now.
So if you have a comment on this, if you have a comment on the nomination of Neil Gorsuch to the Supreme Court, the pro-life movement, really anything in that realm, we would love to hear from you. 800-351-1212. Robert has been waiting from Texas. Hi, Robert. Thanks for calling in.
Hi. I'm calling in regard to a couple of letters I sent to the president through his White House forum. And the questions I have regard to an incident that just happened recently here in Victoria, Texas. A Muslim temple, or whatever the building is, a mosque, was actually burned down. And that just happened like a week ago. And it was
in Victoria, Texas?
Mm-hmm.
Did you read about that, Nick?
Yeah. Haven't you all raised over $900,000 through a GoFundMe account?
Well, I didn't. I didn't have anything to do with funding it. I'm a Christian. However, I did go to the meeting, and I supported them only in that sense. I don't believe it's right for anybody to start taking this kind of action. In any case, I wrote the president regarding it because I was quite upset about it. And what I was upset about was the two things. One was I'll get to the main one, which I listened to Kirby on just today on his app, and that was regarding Muslims not allowed to be entered into the United States from certain countries. I have a problem with this because America has...
Actually, it's people not being allowed. It's not just Muslims. It's people from certain countries that where there's a lot of Islamic terror going on.
Well,
it's
even
people,
more
though.
so. I have even a more so problem with that because the Statue of Liberty has on it the sign that says, bring me your oppressed. Give me your oppressed. What we're talking about is, are we going to leave our borders porous so that the oppressed can come in? Or are we going to shut it down because we're doing this vetting process of keeping, a whole group of people away? And in the meantime, people who actually are grouped into that group are not allowed in.
Well, it's temporary. It's temporary until we get our vetting process to the point where there's a lot of confidence in it. Right now, there isn't.
But temporary doesn't mean temporary because I remember back in the Holocaust days, there was a big ban on allowing anybody in, and they had a very small window for Jews, and they did a temporary thing in that regard, and it ended up, people lost lives over the matter. And it's not going to be different today. We don't see the Holocaust in our country.
What do you think our policy ought to be?
Well, I believe it ought to be that we have a porous border. However, instead of applying money to things like building a wall and not allowing people to come in, things like that, we need to apply all our forces in making a stronger defense. In other words, building up our police, building up our military, doing a lot of this right near the entry points, and then really having them show the proof without any kind of prejudice as to the color of their skin or, the content of their character. The whole point is that are we going to be a missionary country letting people to come in and see Christ in us, or are we going to keep them out and at arm's distance?
Robert, I have a question. Do you think citizenship is a right, or do you think it's a privilege?
Well, I was born here, so it's a privilege. Mm-hmm. My parents came from Nazi Germany, and they escaped from they and their parents escaped from Nazi Germany. And had they not been able to get through, I would have been a German today. Had I lived.
I'm not a big fan of sauerkraut. I really appreciate the bratwurst, but I'm not a big fan of sauerkraut. Robert, I love your heart. I think there's very much you're right with the Statue of Liberty. I mean, it does give me your tired, give me your weak, give me your poor, and come find rest here in America. But I don't think security has to be mutually exclusive with compassion. Would you agree?
Well, no. What I'm thinking you're saying is we need to put a security breach in front of innocent women and children and innocent men who are coming over, and they really want freedom from their oppressed country, and they don't have any other recourse. They're seeing America as a free country. They want freedom. They're willing to give up all to come here, and they're blocked because they happen to be in a country that's on the ban for 90 days. And who knows? So if you're talking about from strength, we're the strongest nation in the world. What, we need to get stronger by putting up borders? That doesn't make sense.
Yeah,
we need to be
I think just
within.
wiser and more informed.
Yeah, I think one of the hearts behind it, I mean, President Obama
Wiser in what way? How is it wiser?
Yeah,
it's wise to be able to know who's coming in, what their status is while they're in, and then to know when they leave if they are supposed to leave by visa. And so as long as we don't know that, I think that we pose a danger to our people. This is a pause. This is it's a period of time. There will be policies that will be constructed and shored up and strengthened. And then I think we will be able to become compassionate, but in a shrewd and wise way. Nick?
Yeah, Robert, I think I agree with you to a certain extent in that we do need to be a country that recognizes that we are built upon immigrants. That we are what we are today because we were so different, and that almost 3 centuries ago there were individuals that had a radical idea of a new concept where our rights were inalienable, come from a creator, and that there should be equality for all as we pursue after life, liberty, and happiness. And I think one of the interesting things is the government has got to, one, it's got to be able to keep us safe, one, because that's one of the primary responsibilities of our government. And so, but two, it has to be open and equitable. So I would say that the two concepts of being compassionate and being secure don't have to be mutually exclusive. I think this temporary ban was put in place in order that there might be able to be a more refined and judicious system by which individuals can come to our country. But I think even greater than that, just the sheer expense of trying to get people to come over here, I think we need to be more concerned with what does it look like to send resources over there to be able to help refugees that are in those countries.
We continue to take your calls here at Point of View, 800-351-1212. We'll be back after these messages.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. The Islamic Society of Basking Ridge, New Jersey has fought City Hall for the last 4 years. The society hopes to build a mosque in the Liberty Corner section of Bernards Township, ending the 25-mile one-way drive its members must make each day to attend daily prayers. The township has rejected their application 9 times. The planning board held 39 different public hearings over 3.5 years, significantly more hearings on a site plan than any other application to date. Every time the Islamic Society amended their application, the township insisted upon additional requirements. In short, the city buried the society in endless paperwork that no other house of worship had to complete. In November of 2016, the United States Department of Justice sued the township on behalf of the Islamic Society. Less than 2 months later, they won. Those seeking to build a house of worship should never be harassed. It is both unfair and unlawful for a city to require one house of worship to meet certain standards, but allow a different religious body to ignore those same standards. This case will probably be appealed and the challenge will continue, but I hope the Islamic Society will continue to be successful. In a land that values freedom, our government should never make the free exercise of religion difficult. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
You can learn how to protect religious freedom in the workplace, public schools, your church, the military, and more by downloading First Liberty's free Religious Liberty Protection Kits at firstliberty.org. That's firstliberty.org. If you want hope for religious freedom, go to firstliberty.org.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Welcome back to Point of View. Final segment, and Nick Pitts is here with me. We're having a good time. We've got one more topic to bring up. I posted an article from the Washington Post. It was an opinion piece earlier this week by Newt Gingrich. The title is Margaret Thatcher is the Real Model for the Trump Presidency. And I thought it'd be fun to talk about it with you, Nick, since you major on presidents in a lot of your studies. And so it, sort of down into the article, it says Trump is a direct mortal threat to both the power structure and the ideology of the left. I think that's really what we're seeing, not only in the campaign, but with his actions since he has been inaugurated. The left knows it, says Newt Gingrich, and is responding just as the British left wing responded to Thatcher. the young liberal fascists breaking windows and intimidating Trump supporters on Inauguration Day, and what's happened since, displayed the kind of hostility that Thatcher evoked on the left. And certainly the left in Britain became unhinged, he says, with its bitter hostility. It kept drifting further and further out of the mainstream. And that's where I think the danger is. The left in America now, I mean, we've talked about the life issue, and some of the millennials, are actually smart enough to be pro-life, because being pro-abortion, 9 months of pregnancy, is way out of the mainstream. It's unhinged, basically. And so, that's just one of the issues. But these anti-Trump marchers, say in the Women's March, and how vulgar it was, and talking about blowing up the White House as Madonna did. I mean, this mirrors the left in Great Britain, their reaction to Margaret Thatcher. And it's just interesting to see someone like Thatcher being compared by Newt Gingrich to Donald Trump, and what they're doing to sort of blow up the leftist, and in her case, the socialist, sort of the march towards that.
Yeah. So Newt Gingrich, no one can say that he doesn't have an active imagination. I think that's one of the unique things what we see, and I think there are commonalities between the two, between Thatcher and between Mr. Trump. Like you said, Thatcher very much was against socialism that was beginning to creep onto the shores of the UK, and very much was adamantly against that. And so what you see also with Thatcher is that she came from a working class background. She very much was just just worked and saw her parents work, and that
the grocer's daughter.
Yeah, just very much coming from the working background, and then made herself to be the prime minister, which is similar to Mr. Trump. Fred Trump was just a working man, albeit a very successful business working man. But then he passed off to his son, and Donald Trump is very much coming from the business background. But I think what I love about Margaret Thatcher is that she has this infamous quote in which she says, in politics, if you want something said, give it to a man. If you want something done, let a woman do it. And so we just see this picture of just very much a proactive, results type A leader. And what we see with Thatcher is something very similar to what we see with President Trump. Example A being the first 10 days of this presidency, very much wanting to get things done. Now, there are certain ways he could have done it a little bit better, but nevertheless, he got things done. And now we're trying to see what's going to happen next.
Yeah, I mean, he's a man, but Thatcher certainly dedicated to destroying the moral legitimacy of socialism. And Trump, I think, started out trying to destroy political correctness, and he just sticks with that message. And that's really one of the key tenets of socialism. When you become politically correct, you're much wider open to the left and to socialist policies.
Yeah, one of the things about political correctness, which is one the admirable thing about political correctness is the root of it in the 80s really tried to allow people to be included. It wanted more people included in on the matter, and so it wanted to hinder speech in such a way that would keep people excluded from the conversation, which is a good thing. When it started to take its more extreme, radical versions is when we saw a perversion of it that really is just what it's come today, which is just, it's not necessary, that keeps people from having honest conversations, because I guess you could say, especially in millennial generations, we call them snowflakes, I guess is the word that's often been used relative to millennials and not being able to handle a harsh word. But what we saw with Trump is very much this battle against political correctness, whereby he just wants to have honest conversations and finally say, these things aren't working, these things aren't good. Let's quit repeating the same mistakes that we've been making over the years, and let's start moving and exploring potentially new solutions.
In so many presidencies, you see sort of a campaign, but then you see a timidity that sort of sets in at the beginning, because you know that you've got to work with Congress, you know that you're going to get opposition. And I see that Trump is sort of a bull in a china shop. Yeah, he's definitely made some, perhaps caused some chaos in his implementation of things. And if he took longer, he might not have caused that chaos. But I also, in my heart of hearts, think he's doing it quickly before he's stopped from doing it. And maybe that's just the only way that some of this stuff can happen.
Yeah, he's used to being in a business world whereby he says it and it's done. And it's just not the same that it is in government. But I think one of the interesting things you're seeing is I keep on being reminded of President Clinton's first 100 days. President Clinton very much had this active agenda of things that he wanted to get done, but the messaging of the way in which things were being done was just being mishandled greatly, to the extent that you started seeing David Gergen come into the administration, George Stephanopoulos being repurposed in the administration. And then after that 100 days, you started to see more of a stream work to the presidency of what we saw over the next 8 years relative to Clinton. I think what we're going to see with Donald Trump is he's just an individual that has no political government experience right now. Of course, things are a little bit more less than desired, the way they're being delivered, but nevertheless, he is delivering on some of his promises. We shouldn't be surprised by the things that he's doing, because this is what he's been talking about for the past 13 months. And hopefully we're going to see him learning from some of those mistakes that he's made along the way, in order that we might be able to continue to move further and further.
Let's take another call or two before the end of the program. Let's go to Denise in Georgia. Hi, Denise.
How you doing?
Thanks for calling.
All right. I wanted to ask that Robert. I want to know what he's thinking there when we're letting all these people in that say that, oh, I am so good and I'm doing right and I'm going to follow your rules, and these men come over here and ladies and whatever and go to our schools and take our positions that our people, our children in the United States of America could have a spot in the college to go and to specialty schools to go and learn how to ride airplanes and get in on these big companies, and then they get up there and doggone shoot us down, and they kill all these people, all these American people, because somehow there was nothing in the system telling them, to find out if that person was a good person or not, or if that person was going to abide by American rules,
Yeah, that's what we have to discern, and you can't always just ask a question and expect the answer to be, truthful. And most of the people, the refugees that are coming in from these countries, they're fleeing violence and war, and it's not that we don't need to be compassionate about this, but the first priority of a government, Nick, is to protect its citizens.
Over the past 30 years, there have been 0 murders by refugees here in the U.S. And so we're not asking to just completely shut out. There just needs to be a more ordered system whereby we know who's coming in, and that we can make sure that we have a more secure and prosperous nation to the best that we can be. Because from a biblical perspective, we all know that we've fallen short, right? We all know from Romans 3:23 and Psalm 14, we all know that there's brokenness inside of all of us. But in the land of the free and the home of the brave, we want to hope that there's going to be an opportunity for whoever, whether it's the person that's been here for 3 generations, the person that's been here for 3 days, has the opportunity to be able to hear about the good news of Jesus, that yes, there are broken people, but he is a person that brings perfect healing regardless of the situation.
Nick, thank you so much for just all your contributions today. It's been fun co-hosting with you.
Oh, it has been so fun. The feeling is mutual.
And thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Elisa and Shamila and everyone that helped to make the program happen today. Thanks for joining us, ladies and gentlemen, for all the great calls. We'll see you tomorrow.
Why does Kirby Anderson do what he does? Because he believes in God's ability to use you to make a difference.
There's a real need for us to articulate a responsible biblical perspective and to give people an understanding of what is happening in the world, and in addition to educating them, to then empower them to go out and make a difference for Christ.
Together we can push back the growing darkness. It's not going to be easy, but by God's grace, it is happening, one person, one community at a time. Join us in this mission. Become a monthly partner. $1 a day, $30 a month will make a huge difference. Or perhaps you can do $100 a month. We need partners of all sizes. We need you. Give today online at pointofview.net. At the top of the page, next to the Donate Now button, click on Become a Monthly Partner. Pointofview.net. Mail your donation to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221, or call 800-347-5151. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kirby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I am constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.